And in this module, we are going to consider the Eloquent ORM. The Eloquent ORM is the best way or the most preferred way to interact with the database. It's really simple and makes your coding really efficient and effective, and also streamlines and helps you to develop even complex relationship with ease. So without further ado, let us dive in and see how to work with the Eloquent ERM. All right. So what I'm going to do, just to remember everything that we have learned so far, is that I'll be combining everything that we have learned so that we can be able just to pick up as we go along. So I'm going to create a migration. So I'm going to say PHP artisan make migration, and this migration is going to be create, let us call this table maybe profiles underscore table. So something that I forgot to mention is that one thing with migration is that you should always name your migration in plural form. All right. So for example, you are creating a table for the users. In your migration, the table, the migration should be named as users. All right. Create users tables. If you are creating something that has more than one word, for example, test cases, your migration should be test cases. All right. So in our case here, I'm creating profiles. So my migration should be profiles. And then the model should be named in a singular format of the migration, but in a camel case. All right. In a camel case. So this is what I mean. Let me just go here. So if you name your migration like maybe tables, your model should be in the camel case, which is table. And if you name your migration, for example, let us say test underscore cases like this, then your model should be test cases like this. So your migration will always be in a snake case, while your model will always be in a camel case. All right. So that is enough for now. So if I go now to my profile migration here that I've created, I'm going to add a name here. So I'm going to say name, and then I'm going also to add, maybe for now, let us add maybe an email. This is going still to be a string, and this is going to be email like this. And then I'm going also to add, maybe let us add age, and this should be integer. This should be age like that. So that is enough for now. And then I'm going just to run this migration by saying, you can remember, the only thing we need to do is PHP artisan migrate. All right. So that will migrate our migration or our table that we have just created. So now if I go to the DB now and do a refresh here, we should have our table. So let me just go to our database and do a refresh here. So we have our table here, table profile with 3 fields, namely the name, the email, and the age. All right. So I need now to create a model for this migration or for this table. And the way that I've told you, I just say PHP artisan. To create a model, say make model, and the name of the model will be the singular form in camel case, which will be profile. So I just do like this, and then this will create a file by the name profile in the model folder. So now if I go to the model folder, this is the app. Inside the model, you can now see we have the profile file here. So what you need to do is that you need to specify the data that will be going into the database in this model in 2 ways. Number one, you can say protected, fillable like this. And the data that is going here, as we all know so far, is that we have the name, the age, we have the name, we have the email, and we also have the age. All right. So this is the data that is going into into the database. So this is the first way that you can be able to specify the data that is going into the database. Yeah, I'm getting an error. This should be okay. I think this should be here. This is the first way you can be able to specify the data that is going into the database. The second way is, which is much more cleaner and much shorter, is by saying the data which should not go into the database, while everything else that you have left out will go into the database. So in this case, I can say I want only when someone passes ID, then ID should not go into the database, and by that you say protected guarded. All right, and then you specify an array, and then you pass that column that you don't want it to go into the database. All right, so I'll use this first one and leave the second one here for now, and then now I'll come back to our controller now, and inside our controller now, to interact with our model now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say our model, which is profile. All right, so you need also to import this file here, app model profile, to import the profile model. And then in order to insert into the DB, you need to use the create method. And then inside here, you're going just to pass an array with the data that need to be inserted into the DB. In this case, we need to have the name, and this name will be Kevin Amai. Then we need to have the email, all right, and this email will be kevin@gmail.com, and we also need to have the age, all right, and this age will be, let us say, 45, all right. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going just to dd and say maybe test. So if I go to the browser, just do a refresh here. As you can see now, it returns the word test, which means that has been inserted successfully. And if I go to the DB now and do a refresh here, then we should have our data inserted into this table, all right? As you can see now, we have our data inserted into the table. How easy was it for us to insert data into the table? So just to recap, number one, you need to have your model. And in your model, you need to specify either the data that will go into the database or the data that will not go into the database. In this case, I'll specify the data that should not go into the database. And then secondly, you need to import the model into the controller. In this case, we have imported the model. In our case, it is here. And then to insert the data into the database, you need to call the create method, all right? And the create method, you can just pass the name of the column with the data that you need to go into the database. So that is how we insert data using the Eloquent ORM into the database. In this lesson, we are going to look on how to select or to get data from the database using the Eloquent ORM. So without further ado, let us dive in and see how to do this. In my code back here, to get data is very, very easy. And the way you do this, you just say, if you want to get everything from a table, you just say profile, for example, and state all. And then we can assign this to a variable, say, let us say profiles. So like this, and then I can just delete this guy here and say profiles like this. That's all, and you'll be able to get all the data from a table. And so I've added some data here into the database, and now if we go to a home page and do a refresh here, you should be able to see all this data displayed here. As you can see, it returns an array with 4 elements, and if you can open them, you can actually see that these are the data that we have in the database. This is the first row, and if you go to the attribute section here, you can be able to see the data that is in the database. So to get the data for one person, you can simply use this find method and then pass the ID here. In this case, I can just say find and then pass the ID inside here. And then if I do a refresh here, as you can see now, this returns one array or the first row. And again, you can be able to do not just using the ID, but you can also use the where phrase For example, you can say where maybe the name, you can just say where the name, and then comma, and just say where the name maybe is Kevin Amai. And then one thing you need to do is just to add a get function, or to attach a get function towards the end of this method here. And now if I do a refresh here, as you can see, this returns one array, and if I open this array here, it returns where the name is Kevin Amai. So that is how you can be able to fetch data from the database. The other method, like find or fail, this will throw an error if it doesn't find the data that you have requested from the DB, right? So that is how basically you can be able to get data or use the where clause to get specific data from the database. In this lesson, we are going to look on how to update the DB using the Eloquent ORM, all right? So without further ado, let us dive in and see how to do this. And to update the DB is very, very easy. You just say profile, for example, profile model where name equals to this, and then you pass the update method here, and then you'll pass an array inside this and specify the element that you need them to be updated. Maybe I want to say the name should be updated to something like maybe Peter Jones, all right? And maybe you want the age also to be updated to something like maybe like 45, and also maybe the last one that we had was the email to be updated to something like maybe peter@gmail.com. all right? After doing this, let me just refresh my code here. So when the code updates successfully, it returns this value 1 here. And now if we go to the DB and just do a refresh here, we should have the name Kevin Amai, or the data for the guy Kevin Amai updated by Peter. So as you can see, we have now Kevin Amai updated to Peter, and also the email updated. So that is how you can simply be able to update using the where clause. You can also use the ID by saying find and then pass the ID here and then do an update. So I find this guy and then do an update. For example, Peter, I can just update this to Stephen King. You can have the age to maybe 18. You can have maybe the email to Stephen@gmail.com. all right? So let me do a refresh here again. So as you can see, this also returns true. And if I go to the DB now, just do a refresh here. As you can see now, our data has been updated here. And something also about the where clause is that you can be able to combine more than one where clause in order to update data. Let us say you have a long list of users and you need to get where age maybe is below 45 and the name is Kevin Amai. So that you can be able to do by just saying where, for example, like this, and say where the name is Kevin Amai, like this. And then you can also call another where clause here and say where again the age is maybe the age is 25. So it will combine these two statements into an AND statement and execute the query. So here we are updating where the name is Kevin Amai, and again where Kevin Amai, the age is 25. And in our case here, let us see if we have that case. We don't have any of this case, so it won't update any. But as you can see here, we have these 3 rows here which have the age as 45. So I can change this to 45, and I can also change this to Kevin Msungu like this. To update this row here, Kevin Msungu, and where the age is 45. All right. So let us run this again and see. As you can see, it has returned 1. And then if I do a refresh here, as you can see now, our second value now has been updated to Stephen King, Stephen@gmail.com. So that is how you can be able to update data using the where clause or using the find statement to update. In this lesson, I want us to consider the last function, and that is deleting. So let us go back to our code and see how to do this. It is also quite simple. For example, let us say I want to delete where the ID is 1. You just say find like this. This will find where the ID is 1, and then I want to perform a delete, all right? So you just attach a delete like this, and this will delete where the ID is 1. So if I go to my browser here and just do a refresh again, so it returns a true. And if I go to the database and do a refresh here, we should have only 3 records because 1 record has been deleted. As you can see, our record has gone. And again, you can be able to, the same way we did applied where, we can be able to use a where clause here when deleting and just say where the name maybe is, let me just see, where the age is, where the age, we can say, then you'll pass like this and say where the age is less than maybe 45, all right? So let us try this and see. So this returns 1, which means it has deleted our record here. So if I go back to the DB, you can see the record where we had 18 has been deleted. So just play around and try to, to solve much more complicated problem, and you'll be able to get and understand this Eloquent ORM better. So try to combine where, try to find out or where there's something else you can say or where here. So I can use or where to combine or to check where our case here matches the one in the database. All right. So just try to play around with this, the where statement, the or statement, the find statement, the insert, the update, and you'll be able to understand this much better. So this brings us to the end of this module of learning how to interact with the database using the Eloquent ORM.